Hello, viewers. It's Josie. Welcome back to my eclectic movie reviews and updates. So today I'm going to be discussing the horror phenomenons that are Obsession and Backrooms. I'm going to analyze both films. Now, comparing both of them is like apples to oranges, but I'm not really gonna do a full-on comparison until the end, which isn't even a full-on comparison. You'll understand when I get there, but it's just there is one interesting commonality, thematically speaking, between the two that I'll get to later. But before I get to that, I am going to analyze both separately. I just think it's really awesome that these films have taken the box office by storm, and proving that audiences do want original movies. And I feel like when people talk about the whole debate over whether or not audiences want original or not unoriginal movies, I think a better word to say is that audiences don't want original movies. They want unique movies, because a movie could be not based on IP and be completely recycled from other things. But that's a topic for a whole other video. But I think what Obsession and Backrooms prove is that audiences want to see unique visions. So let's get on to let's talk about Backrooms first. I'm going to be looking at Backrooms as a capitalist takedown here. Now, many analyses of Backrooms have equated it with the mind, which is 100% true. I am not discrediting those takes at all. In fact, I think that that's a thematic purpose of. I believe that's intentional. The Backrooms copies include human psyches. However, because plenty of YouTube channels have done deep dives into the psychology of both Clark and Mary already, I'm going to steer away from that and discuss something different that I feel like not as many reviewers are touching upon. Kane Parsons establishes enough ambiguity to leave the audience up to as much interpretation as they want. And I do not know if this was necessarily Kane Parsons' intention, but I think Backrooms can be interpreted as a critique / takedown of capitalism. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when people discuss why stores are closed is Amazon. And certainly, the rise of Amazon when it comes to shopping for basic household necessities and other stuff and gifts and all that has made an impact. But I think for every lazy person that doesn't want to get off their ass and go out and shop, there are as many people who actually like getting out of the house and going to stores and looking at things, even if they're not buying anything. There are studies that talk about how it's good for the brain, to have tactile relationships with what's being sold when you go shopping. Now, however, I think a factor that has led to just as much, if not an even greater impact, is, as far as stores closing, is the rise of private equity. Private equity, for those who do not know, besides being one of the worst things to happen in the history of American business, is when firms invest and collect money from various sources in order to buy companies, whether that be small businesses / mom and pop shops, or large companies, in order to upgrade and expand before selling them off to another company. after about 5 to 10 years. They claim that that's their goal. To be fair, I'm sure that there have been examples of businesses that have improved after private equity took over, at least for a short period. But for the most part, private equity companies have abused power by essentially killing businesses for profit. What is sad is that there are even successful businesses that have been killed by private equity, like Joann's Fabrics. But also, too, they to be fair, they also had kind of a identity crisis with trying to chase after, um, like being like Home Goods or Bed Bath and Beyond, when they should have just stuck with what their name was, Fabrics. Um, Now, and then, and Toys R Us, I mean, was also basically killed by private equity. And now there is a company brought up in Backrooms, Async, the research institute. It's not a private equity company, but it's in. But speaking of like, but well, private equity companies, uh, it's cheap after, like, killing businesses. It's actually cheaper. It's cheaper for them to leave places vacant than for, like, places, for them to be, like, taken. And sort of connected to that, Async is intent on using the backrooms for storage and transportation at low cost. And obviously, this is dangerous given what goes on in the backrooms. And although Async is not a private equity company, there is a connection that could be made between the two, and that's the intention of taking advantage of abandoned space for profit, as it is cheaper to leave places vacant. ASIC expanding the backrooms parallels private equity companies continuing to leave more and more places vacant. And the Captain Clark Furniture Store is essentially one of the types of businesses that private equity companies like to scoop up. And this is also an interesting take. On the In Session Film Podcast review episode of Backrooms, they addressed the film's theme of capitalism, not to the extent that I am here, but they talked about the scene where Clark brought Kat and Bobby into the backrooms only for them to be killed. And J.D. Duran connected this to the exploitation of labor and the disposability of workers. And also, like, when bosses or supervisors say, like, they're doing this to help you when they're really not. And despite the film's analog setting, I've also seen some interpret Backrooms as an allegory for the AI slop economy. The Backrooms essentially make disjointed photocopies of places as well as the subconscious mind, and as Chiwetel Ejiofor's character Clark points out about the Backrooms, the more it remembers something, the less it does. To that point, Clark adds that the Backrooms are, to a degree, an enhanced upgrade of the outside world. I'm going to read an excerpt from a Medium article or post by someone that goes by the username Comic Horse Girl. The very nature of AI is to feed off of human data and creativity and play permutations and combinations with the same until the process gets into an infinite loop that it becomes an entity of its own. Big Tech describes this state of automation as model collapse. It's interesting how the human-like beings shown towards the end of the film faintly resemble early AI hallucinations of people from when generative AI started to take shape. The way I perceive artificial intelligence to work, it's almost like God, but a more degenerate version of it that's always fated to collapse, much like the Backrooms. If artificial intelligence had a manifestation as a physical infrastructure, I'd imagine it looked like the Backrooms. Large, soulless, yellow-stained monotony that keeps remembering and misremembering names, faces, places, feelings until it's stripped of all the soul and consciousness. The medium user further goes on to explain how the more AI is dependent upon for creating anything, the more soulless and lifeless one's work will be. There is no more authentic originality when everything is just a copy of a copy of a copy. That said, Backrooms can be interpreted as a cautionary warning against the over-reliance of AI. To that point, you can look at async as not only a stand-in for private equity companies, but also big tech. I mean, MRI isn't exactly a company making MRI machines isn't like big tech per se, but it's well, they used to make MRI machines, but they're now heading into similar to AI companies. Async is trying to explore possibilities. At least that's what they say. But really all they care about is profit. So that's what I have to say regarding capitalism and Backrooms. Forgive the air conditioner sound because it's, hot. It is hot where I am in New York. So, gotta stay cool. I have mine on eco, so it goes on and off. So let's move on to obsession. Obsession, speaking of cautionary tales and warnings, obsession is not only a classic example of a cautionary tale about being careful what one wishes for. It is a warning about the red pillification, if you will, of today's insecure young beta males with the rise of the manosphere pushing alpha male, alpha beta male, whatever persona behavior. Film critic Ryan McQuaid from Awards Watch brought up on the Pop Culture Confidential podcast, as well as his own Awards Watch podcast, that they're wishing for Nikki to love him more than anything in the world and thereby removing her free will speaks to how we are living amongst a generation of young men who have the audacity to vote against women's rights. Bear is not written to be a MAGA individual, nor is he shown consuming any manosphere-related media. Nevertheless, he demonstrates certain qualities of men influenced by the manosphere when it comes to romantic relationships. One of the major factors luring young men into the manosphere is the fear of women rejecting them. The cowardice on Bear's part is one of the many self-inflicted factors leading to his downfall. This is not to say that men who are shy around women should feel ashamed of themselves. Rather, I'm arguing that it would have been healthier for Bear to express his feelings for Nikki, whether or not she had feelings for him. We never learn from Nikki's end what she actually feels about Bear. Indy Navarrete has stated in interviews that she is not against the possibility of Nikki having feelings for Bear. That's up for the audience to decide. Let's say that she did not have feelings for Bear. Of course, Bear would feel hurt. It is only human to feel sad when someone you have feelings for doesn't feel the same way. I'm not saying the right thing to do in such a situation should be to man up and get over it, per se. For it takes time to heal. Instead, the healthy thing for Bear to do if he was rejected would be to do some deep soul cleansing and soul searching. Given that Bear is insecure, a reframing of self-concept would be beneficial to his overall mental health and quality of life. Again, Bear does not have the courage to take such introspective steps. There are also many men in real life who do not. Rather than encouraging young men to process the pain of rejection, the manosphere spaces present the idea that men are entitled to women loving them. To that point, Bear is so obsessed with the idea of Nikki loving him that he doesn't take into account what is best for her. For example, when she says that she's thinking of leaving the music store to work on writing, he doesn't congratulate her or wish her well in future endeavors. Instead, he's concerned about how he will get to continue interacting with her. And perhaps the biggest example of Bear's selfishness is when the real Nikki pops out during bedtime and asks Bear to put her out of her misery from the spell and kill her, rather than consider the fact that the real Nikki underneath the wish Nikki is suffering. He instead asks what's so bad about being with him. When Bear calls the One Wish Willow customer service line asking if he could alter the wish, the real Nikki screams through the phone begging for help out of whatever prison her soul is stuck in. Bear does not say that he will help her get out of there. Instead, he allows her suffering to continue so he could have the version of a relationship with Nikki that he thinks he wants. And, if, let's just say Nikki did act like Bear back, and they did have a relationship without him making the wish, I think that relationship could have failed anyway, because, I mean, look, the dude is irresponsible and he can't even keep his cat alive. If he can't take care of a cat, then he probably isn't ready for a relationship with a healthy relationship, stable relationship with a human being. And additionally, Manosphere circles push the concept that men are victims. Bear carries a victim mentality. He embodies a poor me attitude. In reality, he brought all of this bad luck upon himself. More importantly, Nikki is the true victim. Because the real Nikki is trapped in whatever space she's in as the entity has occupied her body, several reviewers are not wrong that Bear having sex with Nikki is, post-wish, is basically rape. And Manosphere spaces normalize sexual aggression. And this is also on the Disconnected podcast, Ryan Verrill's physical media podcast. Dr. Will Dotson, who's a professor of film, who I really like, and I like when he goes on the Disconnected on the first Thursday of every month. So he was a guest, and he was talking about obsession, and he said that Indy Navarrete played all the roles that young women in Hollywood are allowed to play. And I think if you're looking at it under that lens, that only further highlights the shallow view Bear has of Nikki and how, beta males tend to view women in general. To them, they're either elusive enigmas of beauty placed on pedestals that are super hard to get, or annoying, needy bitches. Nikki is not only a victim because of Bear's reckless decisions, but also that of the whole friend group. Some reviewers have suggested the possibility that Bear and Sarah could have had a healthier relationship had he not been so busy chasing Nikki. And I think that that's not an invalid question to ask. However, given Bear's personality, that relationship could have also turned sour. While I don't think that Sarah deserved to be killed, she's not entirely... I wouldn't say she's entirely innocent either. That's a friend, Owen Moorhead from the Popcast Network. Those are the words of Owen Moorhead from the Popcast Network. He pointed that out, that Sarah, even if she's not like an angel, it wasn't right that she got killed. And to that point, I think it's fair to question the integrity of her and Nikki's friendship. And when Nikki hits herself with the beer bottle at the party, Sarah doesn't go up to try to help her. In fact, nobody does. And Bear's best friend, Ian, is also a piece of shit. Not just, him not helping, Bear out, instead of saying, I wish for $1 billion. The money falls, which is hilarious. Him helping Bear out, you could say was like to get Nikki was really uh, a way for him to get with Nikki himself, because it's revealed that later in the film that Ian and Nikki have slept together, and I have a theory. Considering how Ian is also a toxic male, part of me wonders if the reason why Nikki decides to leave the music store is because Ian possibly maybe got sexually aggressive with her, pushing her to a breaking point as far as like boundaries are concerned. And with all that being said regarding the toxicity of the friend group, Nikki was justified in wanting to leave the music store. And there are two films that I think could compare well, that I think thematically make I I've made in my head as far as thematic connections to Obsession. And one of them, on paper, it may not sound like the case because they're totally different plots, but hear me out. As I was thinking about what Obsession has to say about uh toxic men in relationships and the stripping of women's agency, I thought of Bob Clark's Black Christmas. Let me just double check the year. Black Christmas, 1974. I was correct. I thought of Bob Clark's Black Christmas because that film was ahead of its time as far as looking at misogyny, in that the killer's motive was sparked by the fact that his girlfriend was aborting his child. And I think that that's interesting to look at today. And another film that I think, given the one-sided relationship between if you're in the school of thought that Nikki doesn't have feelings for Bear, if you believe that, like, the unrequited love at all, there have been some people comparing it to 500 Days of Summer, a movie which I absolutely hate. I think it is an incredibly misogynistic movie. And I find the whole conception of that movie just gross. I think a movie that came out 30 years before I consider the good version of 500 Days of Summer is called Chilly Scenes of Winter, directed by Joan Micklin Silver, a film I've talked about on this channel. That too looks at a situation of unrequited love. But what's interesting in that film, I'm bringing that film up because the protagonist, played by John Hurd in that movie, he gives a really amazing performance, is kind of a creep, and he says things in the movie at times that are quite appalling. And and spoiler alert, although it's not really a spoiler because you could kind of see it coming, I think had that film ended with, had Chilly Scenes of Winter ended with, because I believe that when they released the film, originally, they like butchered it and edited it so that it would end with them getting together, the male and female. But I think that had they'd gone with that ending, it would have sent a very misogynistic message, because John Hurt's character is basically a creep. And I mean, you're meant to feel like sympathy and empathy for him, but at the same time, he is you he is kind of he he like, you do see, like, he's not, like, there's a lot of cringy moments with him. Uh and like ha- I think that movie, that, you know how people say that, and I agree with this, American Psycho could not have been directed by a man, and how it's better that it's directed by a woman, because it's like a distant lens, if you will, like, and, critiquing misogyny. I think Chilly Scenes of Winter benefits from having a female directorial perspective in that case. So yeah, that's my analysis of Obsession. Now, and now, are there any connections between Backrooms and Obsession? Now, as I said, comparing Obsession and Backrooms is like comparing apples to oranges. Nevertheless, there is one connection that I think can be made between the two. Both films examine toxic male characters and how their behaviors affect their relationships with women. In both Bear and Clark's cases, they refused to take responsibility for their actions and the consequences they created for themselves. And yeah, that's what I have to say about Obsession and Backrooms. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more of my videos, you can click the like button and subscribe. I also write poetry you can find on Instagram. Thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.